Hello and welcome to Australia in Space TV. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with My Security Media. Today we're crossing to Adelaide with Dr. Sarah Cannard, the Acting Kanyini Mission Director with SmartSat CRC. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We've got an update for Kanyini. We were just saying off camera, this will almost start a playlist for Kanyini. We've been there since pre-launch. You launched last August, and that was on the SpaceX Transporter 11 mission. And we actually did some interviews I think it was in Canberra, with Matt Tetlow at Innovor and Annie Coronius, the CEO with SmartSat CRC, just after the launch. And you were getting data. I think you'd confirmed power and the like. And then we saw some images come out in February. So this is a good mission update. And yeah, maybe you can even start with a mission overview of where you're at and what you've achieved to date already.
Yeah, happy to. So I'll just give a little bit of a background on Kanyini as a whole, just in case people haven't seen the previous versions of these webcasts. So Kanyini is a space mission. Kanyini actually means responsibility and unconditional love for all creation. And when I started getting into the details of what Kanyini does, you sort of understand why. So it's a collaboration between the South Australian government, represented by the South Australian Space Industry Centre, SASIC, and a collaboration with SmartSat CRC, who I'm representing today as the mission lead. We provided a hyperspectral Earth observation payload and an onboard AI compute. We've also got Myriota as the procurement lead, and they provided an Internet of Things payload, and of course Innovor Technologies as the satellite manufacturer and operator. But when I say collaboration, it was broader than just those organisations. We also had the likes of subject matter experts from across the industry, including Nova Systems and UniSA, supporting us on that journey with test and evaluation facilities, etc. So it really is a collaborative mission, and quite a historical one, because it is Australia's first ever state government funded satellite mission, and really got to commend the team on what they've done so far and the initiative. So like I alluded to, so Kanyini has a hyperspectral imager on board, AIT capabilities, and AI capabilities and IoT capabilities as well. And the purpose of the mission, right from the get-go, was about uplifting the local space capability, improving the supply chains, getting space heritage for our industry. And it's really a bit of a unique situation where we're working with government essentially as the client, working deeply with industry and researchers to design, build, test, operate our first Earth observation satellite. And we're really quite proud of the team. So in terms of where we're at, we've hit, so like you say, Chris, we launched back in August last year. So it's almost been 12 months that it's been in space, which is phenomenal.
Just short of it, yeah.
Yeah, just short. So just working through some updates and some of the key milestones. So we successfully launched in August. We've achieved almost all of the technical objectives so far set out in the initial program. And this included things like completing commissioning of the spacecraft bus itself, but also commissioning of the hyperspectral imager, the onboard AI and the IoT payloads. And these are quite complicated, sophisticated systems. So they've been fully commissioned. And we've also demonstrated their capabilities on orbit. So commissioning is one thing, but then actually demonstrating that they're doing something in space is kind of the next step. So in terms of the on-orbit operation of the Myriota new IoT payload, that was successfully completed as well. And they processed the signals to communicate with that IoT from the ground via their sensor on board through their extant network, which is great.
Was that based in Adelaide too, the sensors?
Good question. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Okay. But I believe it integrated into the extant Myriota network, which is, I believe, is national. But I can certainly get an answer to that question. In terms of the spacecraft bus itself, that includes the attitude control system, the flight computer, the power systems, the deployable solar panels, all of the communications. That was successfully demonstrated, nice. And that's fully operational, which is great. On an Earth observation side of things, there's lots of payloads, so there's lots of milestones going on. from an Earth observation perspective, Kanyini captured over 50 images of Australia and the world, and these have already been delivering valuable data to the SA government and our partners and our researchers. So, those technical milestones really kind of was the encapsulation of this mission, and so ultimately, we've really hit those objectives, and really proud of where we're at today.
So for the images, 50 images, will it be taking some more? And what's the technical specs on those images in terms of spread and resolution?
Yeah. So I guess what you're alluding to, Chris, is we have had an anomaly of late, and that's why we're also providing this update. So in terms of getting more images, we may not have the opportunity to do that, and that's because a little while ago, unfortunately, Kanyini had an unexpected critical technical anomaly. We are in the process of understanding that further. So we're taking a very measured and systematic approach to understanding that anomaly and the root cause, which we believe is due to radiation, but there's a limited amount of information that we've got. But the team's working really hard on trying to understand what that anomaly is. We've spent quite a bit of time having a look into what the causes could be, but also is there opportunities to do some in-orbit tests and experiments to try and get this anomaly understood and recovered. But essentially what's happened is that this anomaly has caused us to no longer be able to communicate to our payloads. Right. So everything that we've done so far, that was already the success. So we're very proud of that. But quite recently, that anomaly, which we're still working through at the moment, has prevented us from having any more communications with the Earth observation payload and the IoT payload. So we're literally still in that investigation. There is some hope that we will be able to get communications back up and running with our payloads, but it is unlikely.
But the satellite system itself, and the notes I've got here is the attitude, the flight computer, and the power systems on the actual bus. So you've still got comms with the satellite, right? It's more comms.
Yeah, that's right. So if you sort of think of it as you've got your satellite main components, so your attitude control, your communications, your UHF, all of that sort of stuff, that's still fully functioning and working perfectly. The little connection to our payloads, where we can talk to our payloads, task our payloads, take images and communicate with the IoT radios, that link is what has suffered that anomaly. So
could it still be taking images though? Could the spectrometer still be working and doing what it's designed to do, and it's going to be eventually just stored on there, and someone's going to find into the future?
No. I mean, we'd love to. There are some images still stored on there that we didn't have an opportunity to bring down. I'd love to go and capture it, but that's not really feasible. But no. So the connection to those payloads includes powering it on, tasking it to take images. So they're sitting there. As far as we know, they're functional, but we can't communicate with them. And space is hard. This is always going to be a risk. And if it's not a failure of an interconnector to payloads, it could be a failure of other elements as well. But like I said, it's an anomaly that we're working through. But as far as we are planning, it is unlikely that we're going to get any more images down, unfortunately.
So what's the longer term then for the satellite? What was the life mission?
Yeah, good question. So the mission had been planned to go for 3 years, but to put it in perspective, this is I guess what we would call like a capability demonstration. So it was essentially an experiment with regards to the payloads. It was the first time Australia's ever done this, and so it was really about that learning journey. Which we achieved essentially all those learnings, like I said, once we commissioned. So in terms of what happens next with the spacecraft, like we said, the spacecraft itself is still fully operational. So that 3-year mission the spacecraft is still going to exist in space for essentially that amount of time. Depending on how the investigation pans out in the next couple of days, we'll know more. But essentially, Innovore, as the bus operator, will continue to monitor that spacecraft. There may be, and it's very early days at the moment, there may be opportunity for us to continue to use that spacecraft for other research opportunities, and we'd be creative there, but just not using the payloads as far as we're aware.
Well, you talked about space heritage, which is very important, and I think this is Innovore's second satellite. So I think it's probably just as important for them to complete their mission and keep it up there for 3 years and the like before. I take it it'll eventually deorbit. That's the longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's in low Earth orbit. So it's sitting at around 530 kilometers up, which gives it about a 3-year lifetime. Yeah.
Nice. And so what was actually achieved in terms of the research? Those 50 images, or maybe the other question is how short did you fall in terms of the research components? Just on the website for the audience, and we'll share the link, but there's about 6 key research projects linked to Kanyini.
Yeah, I think there's 7 actually, but we can update that. Yes, so that's a great question. So the images that we have taken and the research projects that we develop and are funded through the CRC that we're going to utilize Kanyini, those Kanyini images and that Kanyini data was complementary to other sets of data that the research team were going to use. And so none of our projects were solely reliant on the Kanyini data. It was complementary to other data sources from other satellites or in situ sensing as well. So those research projects are still continuing. It's unfortunate that we couldn't use, or potentially can't use, further Kanyini images in the future, but the images that we do have been processed. We're getting them out to the researchers as we speak, so then they can use that to complement their already existing data sets. So really, when we went into this activity and we have these projects, these research projects funded, we all knew the risks. Anyone who sort of works in space understands, the risks, and we appreciated that, of course, from our end. But our researchers also fully appreciated that too. So space is hard. The 50 images that we've got, I think there's just over half a dozen or so that are being used directly for the research, and I can give you some examples, if you like, on some of the research that Kanyini data is being used for. But like I said, it's complementing other sources of data in our research as well.
Well, we might come back to it. I'm just thinking on you suspecting radiation at this stage. Do you think it's a potential degradation of equipment or a sort of a solar storm? How has that equipment been affected by radiation? Is it a gradual effect or was it just a sudden loss?
Yeah, so it was a sudden anomaly, and I guess that's the joys of working in space, is that we can only essentially have educated guesses on what's happened unless we go up and bring the spacecraft down and assess it. So, but what we have heard, actually talking with a lot of other spacecraft providers and having a look at space weather, is that we're in a high solar activity period of time, and so we have heard on the grapevine that there's other spacecraft that have kind of suffered a couple of anomalies as well, and it can be hit or miss. Sometimes you can survive these anomalies for 30-40 years and nothing will happen, or you'll get hit by a solar incident, and it might flip a bit and then the bit will flip back again and you're completely fine. Unfortunately, in our case, it has hit a component. We think it's hit a component, and it's just not been able to recover itself. But we are doing some tests to try and see whether or not we can sort of force it back into life again.
Are you taking a forensic? What's your approach on the investigation and report? Are you taking a forensic approach? Is there a guideline here? It's not something I'm aware of in terms of doing an investigation, a technical investigation.
Yeah.
I imagine you'll just do a technical assessment, and you may have some findings there that you're not, you can't explain.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things that I can't explain, but there's also a few things that we're still working through as well. But I might geek out on you a little bit here. But in terms of like failure analysis or root cause analysis is what we call it. Essentially, there is a system in place, and it's very methodical, and you kind of work through all of the things that could possibly go wrong, even things that you think, couldn't possibly be it.
Yeah.
But what you do is you work through all of the potential root causes, and you kind of do this tick and flick, and you go, unlikely to be that, might be this. And then you take it one step further, and you think, well, if it is this, let's say it's a radiation cause and it's flipped a bit, or it's done a software weird thing, or something seized up. If we try to revive that little component using this method, and we've got that assessment wrong, is that going to cause something else to fail somewhere else? So you kind of got to draw all these dots together and have the full picture in front of you to be able to go, well, these are all the likely causes. These are some likely techniques that we could implement on board to investigate it further, see what we can do with it on board. But if we do that, could that cause something else somewhere else to fail?
Well,
So you've got to pull those pieces together.
And you would link it back to your mission plan and understanding how this was in your initial risk assessments anyway. I'd take it. Have you found that link? Is this something that you were potentially aware of?
Potentially, but again, the investigation is ongoing, so we sort of won't know for a little while yet. But the I guess the tyranny of spacecraft is that if you have something that isn't working, you can't interrogate it to the extent that you would really like. So a lot of it is sort of educational guesswork and experience coming down to what other people have seen, and using the little bits of information that you can to piece together to try and tell the story and fill in those gaps.
Maybe a little bit more on the regulatory aspect here. What is the implications for you as a mission director now that you've lost sort of payload contact with your satellite? Who do you need to tell? What's your reporting process there internationally? Or
it's really because the satellite bus itself is still fully functional. We know where it is. We've got comms with it, which are consistent. Twice a day we can talk to the satellite. The payload element of the spacecraft isn't essentially a regulatory concern. It's not a defence asset, so there's nothing there that we need to be concerned about. So as long as we know where the spacecraft is, then from a regulatory perspective, it's safe. It's not causing harm to anyone else. It's doing what it's supposed to do orbitally, and that'll be fine with the regulators, I believe.
That's the natural critical factor. Well, let's finish off. It was doing a range of different research. Maybe just talk us through that, because I think you were a part of that research aspect of the team as well, right?
A little bit. So I'm acting mission director at the moment, but I was project manager during a lot of this as well. So my responsibility was really making sure that the project itself met its milestones and was available to the researchers. So I know a little bit of the researchers and can certainly talk about some of the examples and potentially some future uses of the data. But I wasn't deep in the research.
Well, maybe just a brief overview of what the research was, because I think that's the driver really at the end of the day, isn't it? To make these missions possible.
Yeah, and you're spot on there. The reason that we do these things, as much as it's super fun to launch something into space,
technical side, yes.
actually needs to do something for someone at the end of it all.
Right.
So happy to run through a couple of examples. So one of the projects that we've got is about seagrass mapping, and so a lot of people might realize or might not realize that healthy coral and seagrass is super important to habitats for species. It provides a natural barrier to erosion, storms. It absorbs CO2, which is great, and it produces oxygen. But the current attempts to understand the health of that coral and seagrass is all at the local scale, so it's like on site, with a human doing some testing. So we're assessing the suitability of that Kanyini hyperspectral data to measure the water quality, health of the coral species and the seagrass at a large scale. So that could really be a game changer on how we understand the health of that seagrass and coral. We've also got something that we're calling ecosystem mapping, and that's essentially using that Kanyini hyperspectral data to better understand what we call vegetation communities. And so what we can do is we can discriminate between native versus invasive species in area to better understand that natural community. But it can also be used to map plant rehabilitation and recovery efforts. We have some beautiful images over Kangaroo Island. You know, they had that horrendous bushfire. So having a look at how that revegetates as well. So that's some important work. The last example I've got is on heat waves. So in this hyperspectral camera that we've got, it's also got a thermal infrared band, we call it. And so this has been used to investigate thermal data, which is, again, going to supplement aerial data, but it's to map urban heat temperatures. And we had a few heat waves in Adelaide over the summer, so we got some maps of those from a thermal perspective as well. So that's 3 examples of projects that we're currently working on. But in terms of you know, future research, like, we've got the data, it's there, we can use it. And although we've got nothing planned currently beyond you know, our current funded research, those 50 images, you know, that can be used to do things like extract turbidity or sediment in coastal waters. We can also extract chlorophyll content. So I'm not sure if you're aware, Chris, but we've got an algae bloom in South Australia, which is making its way down the coast. You know, we can take, we've got images of that that we can use. We've also captured images over Mount Remarkable in South Australia. There's a fire there, and in LA when they had the fire. So we can map those burn scars of where those fires were over those areas as well. So although they're not research projects, this is just some of the really cool stuff that we can do with that hyperspectral imagery that we had come down.
Well, look, it's one of those things, as we mentioned, it's space is hard, but I think it's really important from an Australian viewpoint, and South Australia in particular on this mission, was to have that space heritage, and to you know, the skills that the team has built over the last number of years is really, really important. So we'll keep an eye out in terms of how this progresses, but also subsequent missions as well. And hopefully the South Australian government can kick in and go, okay, well, let's just put up another one. They seem to be launching all the time. In fact, we've just
got a bit of fear of missing out from the other states as well.
That's right. Well, we've had transport of 14 or 15 just go up recently as well. So there's no doubt there's future opportunities. But Dr. Sarah Cannard, Acting Kanyini Mission Director with SmartSat CRC, thank you very much for the update. And thanks for joining us on Australian Space TV.
My pleasure. Thank you.